Another question, where in the Bible does it say that we should have communion, the Lord's table, every time we gather, not just once a month as most churches? Thank you for clarifying where in the Bible, as I've heard it is biblical. Thank you. Well, I think that the general rule is given to us in 1 Corinthians 11, where in verse 25 he said, do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. So it's never prescribed how often you are to do it. It just says, as often as you do it, you proclaim the Lord's death. And so the eagerness of saints in the early church to proclaim the Lord's death resulted in their breaking bread from house to house on a daily basis. They would proclaim the Lord's death. And so it was more of a traditional thing than a biblically prescribed thing, as the early saints that did not have a centralized place of meeting, but were meeting in houses with elders and pastors in those various house churches, that they would have communion far more frequently. And the scripture says that they were doing so daily. And so that was something that was a description, and we have to draw the distinction between something described in Scripture and something prescribed in Scripture. Those two things are different. And so it really falls to what a particular set of spiritual leaders determine is the most advantageous. And frankly, one of the reasons personally that I think it's helpful to only do it once a month, and we typically do it the first Sunday of the month, is that often when you do it more frequently than that, it becomes so routine, so just what you do, that it doesn't have the power that it does when you haven't done it for a time and then you do it. There's a certain, not novelty is not the right word, but there's a certain allure that comes along with observing the Lord's table. Some people take that and say, well, if it's true, if you need a little break, then quarterly would be a good idea. And they do it quarterly. Or some people say semi-annually, twice a year. Or some people say we want to do it annually at Easter, and that's the only time we do it. Well, I think it should be more frequently than that. But it's a matter of conscience and personal taste, not one that's a matter of biblical dictate. All right, so that's how I would respond to that.